Today, we're talking about a car that didn't just define a decade, it actually created a whole new identity for one of the most famous brands in the world. We're going to trace the incredible journey of the Mercedes-Benz W124 and see how it became the very first E-Class.
So, what really makes a car an icon? Is it just the way it looks, or how fast it goes, or is there something more to it?
Well, for the W124, the answer is all about evolution. It's this story of constant refinement, adaptation, and even reinvention. And this car, it's an absolute masterclass in all three.
So let's rewind the clock to 1985. Mercedes-Benz needed a totally fresh replacement for its super popular W123. And what they came up with was the W124, a car engineered from a clean sheet of paper to set a completely new benchmark for executive cars. Right out of the gate, the lineup was pretty impressive. You could get anything from a basic four-cylinder 200 with a carburetor all the way up to the fuel-injected 230e. But the real headline grabbers? The brand new silky smooth inline-six petrol engines in the 260e and 300e, and a whole new family of really advanced diesel engines. And believe me, it wasn't just about the engines. The W124 was absolutely packed with tech that was way ahead of its time for the mid-'80s. I mean, power steering was standard, sure, but things like anti-lock brakes were still a pretty big deal. The optional self-leveling rear suspension, a total game-changer if you were hauling heavy stuff. But the real masterpiece, the thing that set it apart, was that all-new multi-link rear suspension. It gave the car a combination of ride comfort and handling that its rivals just couldn't touch. But Mercedes didn't just sit back and relax. The car's initial success was just the beginning. The next few years were all about expansion, growing the family, adapting to new rules around the world, and basically taking over. And man, they moved fast. Just months after the sedan launched, the super practical and absolutely enormous Estate version showed up. Then, in 1987, we got the drop-dead gorgeous coupe. It had the signature pillarless design, so with the windows down, it felt almost like a convertible. Just like that, the core family was complete. Now, here's something I find fascinating. It's how different markets completely changed the car's look. In Europe, you got these sleek, modern composite headlights. But over in the US, strict safety laws meant they had to use these big, sealed beam units, which gave the car a totally different face. It just goes to show you how much regulations can dictate design. This difference in specs actually created this crazy loophole called gray imports. Basically, other dealers would import the more powerful, better-looking European models directly into the US. By 1985, get this, 1 out of every 3 imported Mercedes was a gray market car. It got so bad for the official dealerships that Mercedes had to lobby Congress to pass a law that pretty much shut the whole thing down. And all this time, the technology just kept marching forward. The US got its first taste of a turbocharged diesel W124. Over in Europe, catalytic converters became standard. And to fight back against rivals like Audi and their Quattro system, Mercedes rolled out its own really sophisticated 4MATIC all-wheel drive system. All right, so by the late 80s, the W14 was a huge success. But Mercedes knew it was time for the next big step, adding a whole new level of refinement and, maybe more importantly, a serious dose of power. In 1989, the first major facelift arrived. You can always spot these cars by the wide plastic panels on the sides. They were nicknamed Sacco planks after the designer, Bruno Sacco, and they gave the car this beefier, more modern look that a ton of other cars ended up copying. And if you wanted a sportier feel, you could get the new Sportline package with a tighter suspension and wider tires. But the biggest news wasn't something you could see. It was under the hood. A new 24-valve double overhead cam engine brought a massive performance boost. We're talking an extra 40 horsepower over the old 6-cylinder. For a luxury car back then, that was a huge, huge leap. And this new obsession with performance led to the creation of an absolute legend. A car that looked so quiet and unassuming, but had the heart of a true sports car. Yep, the wolf in sheep's clothing. This, of course, was the legendary 500e. Now, here's the crazy part. To squeeze the massive 5-liter V8 from their SL Roadster into the W124's engine bay, Mercedes needed some help, so they turned to a pretty surprising partner, Porsche. Porsche didn't just re-engineer the chassis to make it fit, they actually hand-assembled every single one. And the only real giveaway that this thing was packing 322 horsepower, those slightly wider flared wheel arches. It was the ultimate sleeper sedan.
Then, to kind of cap off this whole era of growth, Mercedes did something it hadn't done in 20 years. They brought back a four-seat convertible. The A124 Cabriolet arrived in 1992, adding a final touch of pure open-air elegance to the W124 family. And that brings us to the final, and honestly the most important transformation in the W124's life. In 1993, a second facelift didn't just change the car's look, it gave it a completely new identity. The visual change was pretty dramatic. The classic Mercedes grille, which used to be its own separate piece, was now built right into the hood, a design cue they borrowed from the big S-Class. That, plus some new headlights and taillights, gave the car a much sleeker, more modern face. It was all about aligning it with the brand's new look.
And this is where the name change happened. See, Mercedes was trying to simplify its entire model lineup. With the new C-Class covering their smaller cars, it just made sense to rebrand their core executive line. So the letter E, which for years had stood for Einspritzung, the German word for fuel injection, was cleverly repurposed to mean executive class. Then came the engine size, and finally a tag for the fuel type if needed.
So for example, a 300D turbo became the E300 turbo diesel. The V8-powered 400E was renamed the E420, which actually made more sense for its 4.2-liter engine. It was simple, it was logical, it was modern, and just like that, the E-Class was officially born. So when you look back, after nearly a decade of nonstop evolution, from a simple sedan to a coupe, from a basic four-cylinder to a Porsche-built V8, the W124's journey was coming to an end. But its impact was really just getting started. The W124 established this incredible reputation for what people call bank vault build quality and really forward-thinking engineering. But its greatest legacy? It was that final act, creating the E-Class name, an identity that has been an absolute cornerstone of the Mercedes-Benz brand ever since. And that kind of leaves us with one last thought. In today's world of rapid-fire tech changes and incredibly complex electronics, could a car company even build a car like this anymore? With that same philosophy of over-engineering and just building it to last forever? It really makes you wonder.